Tony, reading from the famous Peter Pan and Wendy yet again, J.M. Barrie's classic, particularly as always for my dear friends at Magway Church, especially for my dear friend Chris. You'll remember that they had shot down, or at least Tootles had gunned down a Wendy, thinking that she was some kind of bird, but if she wasn't, she was Wendy, who was supposed to be their mother, that Peter Pan was sending over. However, the fairy had got quite annoyed, and Tootles had just loosed off with both boars. Well, not both boars, it was after all an arrow. Yep. They take her down into their little house, their little den, and she is asked maybe she could sing what kind of house she would like. So apparently still in her semi-conscious state or asleep, she sings, "I wish I had a pretty house, the littlest ever seen, with funny little red walls and a roof of mossy green," which is exactly what this house has been made to look like. Okay, so it then begins from page 21. The little house is continued, rather. Page 2071. The little house is built. They got it made almost at once because they had all the building stuff ready and handy. They sang as they worked. The little house looked so jolly with red branches and green moss and make-believe roses. Inside it, they'd put the nicest of things from the house on the ground, under the ground. And when they thought it was all properly finished, Peter told them they had forgotten the door knocker and the chimney. So they put the sole of a shoe for a knocker and John's top hat with the bottom taken out of it made a splendid chimney, which started smoking at once. Then they all waited around while Peter knocked on the door. They did so wonder what would happen next. The door was opened, and out came Wendy. She asked, "Where am I?" "Wendy, lady," said Slightly, "this is the house we've built for you." "Do say your please," said Nibs. "It's a lovely, darling house," exclaimed Wendy. The Lost Boys knelt down and held out their arms and cried, "Oh, Wendy, lady, be our mother." Wendy was delighted, but she answered that she was only a little girl. "That won't matter," said Peter. A nice motherly person's all we want." "Very well," said Wendy. "I feel that it's just what I am. I'll do my best. Children, before I can put you all to bed, I will finish the story of Cinderella." So they all squeezed somehow into the little house while Wendy was told them stories. And they were tucked up in bed in their own home under the trees. Wendy was most beautifully motherly. When she'd gone to sleep in the little house, Peter, with his sword drawn, stood and watched outside. Everything was bright and happy as could be. The fairies, going home late, found Peter asleep too. They amused him very much, but did not surprise them. They had got used to Peter by now. So, in the same vein, continuing from All Sorts of Adventures, which is chapter 5. As there was plenty of room in the house underground, Peter ordered that the three little darlings should live there with the Lost Boys. So Wendy, John, and Michael were each given a hollow tree for going down and up again. And they soon learned to go up and down as easily as if they'd done it all their lives. The house was underground and only had one room, but it was very large. There were stout mushrooms to sit on, which grew out of the floor. There was a tree trunk, which did for a table, only it had to be sawed off every day or two to keep it short enough. The fireplace was a jolly big one, so that Wendy could dry her washing. There was an enormous bed in which all of the boys slept, as close as sardines in a tin. Nobody could turn around unless they all turned. Only Michael was hung up in a basket because Wendy didn't want him to grow up too soon. And the basket seemed to make him more like a baby. Wendy herself slept in her own little house. But of course it was rather plain sort of room. There was nothing at all grand in it, and nothing very beautiful except for one place, a square hole in the wall about the size of a canary's cage, with a curtain drawn across, and the most charming furniture inside. A mirror, and a washstand, and chest of drawers, the tiniest you ever saw, and a couch with a bedspread of fruit blossom, rugs and a carpet, and even a chandelier, though the person who lived there lit up the place herself. You will have guessed by now that this person was Tink. She was very conceited about this exquisite little room of hers. She boasted about it to other fairies, but nobody was ever invited in. Wendy was kept very busy with such a large family to look after, sewing and mending and darning socks and cooking for 8 boys, and herself and Peter took up a lot of time. Besides, for hours every evening she had to tell all the stories she could remember. But she didn't mind so much work because she was so extremely happy. She just loved being a mother to so many children. It was the greatest fun for her. Sometimes, of course, Wendy thought about home, about Mr. and Mrs. Darling and Nana, but she was quite easy in her mind about them. She was sure she, John, and Michael could get back again whenever they liked, and that the nursery window would be left open for them to fly in. She was a little bit bothered to see how John and Michael had nearly forgotten their old house already. She wrote out questions on a slate for them, like, what is the eye colour of mother's eyes? Which is taller, father or mother? Describe mother's party dress, and so on. The other boys wanted to be given these questions too, and slightly wrote an answer to every single one, but of course it was all wrong. However, John's answers were quite stupid, and Michael was not sure at all whether Wendy wasn't his real mother. By and by, Wendy found herself forgetting too. Time goes very fast in Neverland. Peter did not play in this slate game, partly because he could neither write nor spell, and partly because he thought all mothers silly. There was one of Wendy's stories about Mrs. Darling which he simply hated, and he went out by himself in a huff when this was being told. No one ever knew what happened when Peter was away alone, but it looked as if he was having adventures. There may have been fights with pirates or grizzly bears or redskins. Peter sometimes came home with his head all banged or bandaged. Still, it wasn't very difficult to tell if his adventures were real ones or make-believe. It was all the same to him. There were some real adventures, though, most exciting. Wendy knew they were true because she was in them herself. There was the cake the pirates cooked so that the boys might die after eating it. It was found time after time, hidden in different places, but Wendy always snatched it before any boy could as much as nibble at it. So she became quite old and hard, and it came in handy for throwing at the pirates. And then there was the adventure of the Neverbird, whose nest fell out of a tree into the lagoon, but that she then went on sitting upon her eggs, and Peter commanded that she was not to be disturbed. And then there was the large leaf on which Tink and some rude little street fairies, finding Wendy asleep, put her afloat, hoping she would be carried off by the tide. There you go. And we'll end this one on an illustration, keeping it just under 10 minutes. Good night, and may your God go with you.